So we're at the end of a really nice 3-day conference. Okay, they asked me to give you a closing keynote, and so I have a short. They asked me to actually come here and give you a closing keynote, give you a little bit more of an opinionated take on OpenSearch and where things are going. And since since I'm never lacking opinion, I figured I'd take the opportunity to stand up here and give you give it a shot. I'm going to give you a short rundown of our journey with Aryn and building a startup in and around OpenSearch and what I think is the road ahead. Don't worry, it'll only take about 3 hours, but I promise I'll keep it entertaining. I'm kidding. It's going to be fairly short, and I'll keep it entertaining. And if you stick around to the end, I'll tell you what I think, or what we think, it should be the next North Star for the OpenSearch project and the community. Okay? So let's get started. Quickly, first I'm going to tell you why and how we got started, and why and how we got started with OpenSearch. Some of the lessons we learned on our journey along the way as we're kind of building our startup and the product around OpenSearch. And then finally, and I think the most important part is what we think is coming ahead in the market for all of our customers and how that, and the implications that it has for the OpenSearch product, itself. Okay? All right, so back in 2022, which in AI years is an eternity, okay? I actually was, just a little bit before that, I used to be the general manager of the Amazon OpenSearch, Elasticsearch service at the time. And in January 2021, we lost the only, Apache V2 licensed, tried and true search and analytics engine we had in the community. And so we at Amazon decided that we would invest in a fork of the Elasticsearch project. And then OpenSearch was born. We started in 2021, and we moved as fast as we could. And by about a year later, not only had we forked the project and released it in July, but by January of the following year, we saw about 1 million downloads per week. Okay, so things were on their way. And as the manager of the OpenSearch service, one of the things that I noticed was that there was a tremendous amount of interest in using OpenSearch for log analytics, but increasingly a growing interest for using OpenSearch for unstructured documents, for document search. But our customers were struggling. They were struggling to get good answers. They were struggling to get good retrieval. They were just struggling to configure things well and actually build their applications on top of it. At the same time, I had some friends in the AI community. Normally, I spent most of my time making fun of them. Okay, for many years, they weren't really doing anything that I thought had any practical interest. But then all of a sudden, roughly around 2017, 2018, we saw this massive rise of generative AI models. And AI becoming so much more general, so much more easier to use, didn't need an AI team in-house to be able to actually do things like summarization, entity extraction, and so on. And all of a sudden, we had this brand new technology to be able to, that we were able to use to attack unstructured data. So you see this growing demand, okay, for this open source project, and this brand new technology coming through, and so we thought, why don't we put them together, right? And then of course, the way it works is you got a really cool idea, you slap them together, and then you're going to profit, right? So that's exactly what we did. We slapped them together. And we were actually one of the first contributors outside of AWS, first organization outside of AWS, to contribute back to the OpenSearch project. We drop shipped, actually literally, you can measure it, tons of lines of code on our launch back in 2023. Right? And I had the privilege at the time to be on the keynote stage, announce our company, and then also end up announcing our product. And so what we had done is we'd actually added conversational search, RAG features, into OpenSearch, one of the first forays into this generative AI space for OpenSearch. We added a RAG search processor for the search pipelines, and we also added conversational memory. And this was experimental in 2.10. Okay. Then a few months later, after we had gone through a variety of security reviews, because at that time, the project was still in the hands of AWS, it went GA in February. And in that process, we learned a lot about the community. Okay? We actually got 2 of our members in Aryn. Aryn AI is the name of the company. I should have said that at the beginning. But we had 2 of the members in Aryn become committers on the project. Austin, if I can see him in the background, there he is. He's part of the technical steering committee. And then eventually, over the last year or so, in 2024, the project actually moved from being part of AWS and now into the Linux Foundation and the new OpenSearch Software Foundation. And I'm part of the governing board. So just really enjoyed our journey with OpenSearch. And this idea of adding RAG to OpenSearch was such a unique idea that our 200 best friends doing other startups, I'm exaggerating a little bit, had the same idea at the same time, and so did AWS. And so here we are in this crowded field trying to sell a RAG product on top of OpenSearch. We thought it was a great idea because, here's this new community that's being formed. Here's, a bunch of customers that we can go and help. And, everybody had similar ideas. So what do we do? Well, we instead focused on the gaps that were missing that our customers needed. Okay? So we had a whole bunch of enterprise customers. And what did they want? They wanted a good, accurate, reliable results from their conversational search engines, their chatbots, their agents. I think, these are all the same thing, but sort of in more increasing generality. And so they wanted accurate and trustworthy agents. And to be able to actually get accurate and trustworthy agents, as we worked with financial services companies, pharmaceuticals, legal companies, insurance companies, what we realized is that their biggest problem, really wasn't the search part. That was part of it. But their biggest problem is that they didn't have clean, high-quality data. Okay? And so that's what we focused on. And that's what we continue to focus on. We have a cloud service that parses your documents with models that we've built on our own, a collection of models that are also open source. But we sort of orchestrate all of these models together to pull and lift the information out of your documents. We deal with like 30 different document types. And then we also have an open source project called Sycamore that allows you to transform these things, use LLMs to transform the output of document parsing, pull out key metadata, key fields, enrich your documents, and then load OpenSearch. We're actually one of the best systems out there today, the most scalable and most accurate system to be loading OpenSearch clusters and also the Amazon OpenSearch service. Okay? In particular, we're focusing on loading OpenSearch with unstructured documents. The other thing that we did is we also built a bunch of deep analytics agents on OpenSearch, right? So these are agents that would allow people to get an understanding and get insights from their large collections of data that were curated. So these might be, transcripts of interviews. These might be legal proceedings. These might be, insurance documents, and so on and so forth. And these agents, one of the things that we learned is they needed more than just vector search. They needed more than just semantic search. They needed to be able to go, because of the scale that these people were at, they needed to be able to go and navigate through their large collections using metadata. So very quickly restrict the data sets that you were looking at based on the criteria that they had. And so you needed your traditional lexical search, you needed your traditional sort of semantic search with vector search, you needed hybrid search, and we also needed to be able to build these agents with database-styled filters and aggregations and so on. And the reason OpenSearch came in handy here is because it was a tried and true open source search engine that we could use, search and analytics engine that we could use that had been put into production for the last 15 years across the industry. And all these features that we needed were already there in the engine. Okay? We didn't have to go and wait for the vendor to come up with this integration or do a workaround. It was all there. Okay? More importantly, it was also scalable. There was manageability built into it, monitoring, enterprise level security built into it. It was just out there, available for us out of the box. I'm like, wow, it's pretty convenient, building on OpenSearch. But we're not the only ones. Over the last year or so, maybe a couple of years, we've seen enterprise contributions outside of AWS and outside of Aryn increase. So we saw the Keynote, for example, in this conference from NVIDIA, where they added support for GPU processing. A bunch of stuff here, if you take a look at these companies, are focused on AI-based contributions, vector search-based contributions. So you can see where the project is actually headed toward. It's going in a direction where I think its popularity is growing in the AI space. On the left-hand side, what you see is a graph of the DB Engine's ranking for OpenSearch, and it's a logarithmic graph. So, we saw more than a 10x increase over the last, year and a half to 2 years. It is now the #2 vector database on DB Engines. Isn't this interesting? It wasn't even mentioned in that list when we first started. Even though that there was a vector database, built into OpenSearch. We were actually one of the first ones to actually put it out there in open source. In 2021 and 2019 is when it first came into the managed service. It is now recognized as the #2 vector database behind, the competition Elasticsearch, right? But its overall ranking is also growing. All right, so what's next? Well, for us, and for I think a lot of the folks, is your main user for OpenSearch isn't going to be a human, okay? We believe the main user for OpenSearch is going to be agents. Agents all over the place. There are billions and billions of dollars right now being spent, not on training new models, okay, so that they can be more intelligent, at training time with more and more data. We're seeing less and less of that going on because there's really, limited returns on more training. But in fact, billions of dollars are being spent on inference, on test time scaling. Okay? What does that mean? It's really, all the innovations that these model vendors are putting in, all these innovations that these hardware vendors are putting in to make models that reason, okay? Models that use tools for different types of use cases. So you've probably heard of OpenAI's O3 model. DeepSeek made a big splash back in January. Gemini 2.5 Pro, Cloud Opus, all of these models, they think for a while, okay, before they do something. And that thinking is really all at inference time, right? You instruct the model to spend some time coming up with the plan, executing on that plan, and kind of looping on that until you actually, solve the problem for people. You might have used something like deep research, using a reasoning-based model to decide what to search for and then come up with an answer. But it turns out these agents, they actually behave very, very differently than humans do. And the kinds of queries that they send, they'll send you, they don't really need things optimized like we've optimized in OpenSearch for low latency. They don't need things optimized for 100 millisecond or 50 millisecond or 10 millisecond response times. These agents, they're going to send out a whole bunch of speculative queries in parallel to figure out the nature of the data that they're querying over, to figure out different parts of the data set. They're going to kind of come back, reassemble these things, and then give you an answer. They're going to probe for metadata. They're going to probe for various other underlying data sets to validate their hypotheses. And it turns out these queries that they send out, if you kind of mess around with them, have a lot of overlap across them. So there's a lot of opportunity for optimization. So one of the things that I want to charge you guys with is, hey, what does OpenSearch look like when it's designed for agents? Instead of focusing on latency, perhaps we should be focusing on throughput. Okay? And I put a number out there just for kick's sake. Do you think we'll ever be able to get to operating over on OpenSearch at about 60,000 queries per second? Right? So we're looking at a throughput number, right? Not a latency number. The other thing that's happening is to support all these various reasoning models. The underlying hardware needs to improve in terms of inference speed. Inference speed can be measured, roughly in terms of tokens per second. How fast can you, process a certain number of tokens so that you can then feed that back in and continue the loop of reasoning that these models have. And you can see over the last 3 years, 2023, roughly the models at, through their APIs, I'll call that the retail speed, was giving you about 20 tokens per second. Then in 2024, it was about 200 tokens per second. And now these vendors like Grok, these are startups really, Cerebras, SambaNova, can run open source models at nearly 1,500 to 2,000 tokens per second. This is insane. This is 10x improvement year over year. What I have in the table here at the top is assuming some number of tokens per second. I think I used 150 tokens per second in 2024, assuming a growth rate of 10x every 2 years, so less conservative than what's actually going on, and pushing it out for 10 years, all the way out to 2035. Okay, that's the top line, the processing speed. And the next set of rows are different data sets that you can find publicly. Shakespeare, all their works, is about 1 million tokens. English Wikipedia is about 10 to the 9th, so about 7 billion tokens. All the PDFs on the web that you can find in 2021 made an approximation here. It looks like it's almost, about 1 trillion tokens, roughly speaking. And then an estimate of the number of tokens for PDFs that you can find on SharePoint, which is the largest repository, by the way, of documents, is the number of PDFs that you can find that are uploaded to SharePoint. And what happens in the next 10 years is amazing. You're going to be able to process today you can already process in around 10 to 12 minutes all the works of Shakespeare. Okay? But in a few years, let's just say we go out to 2032, you'll be able to process all of the English Wikipedia, just for every query, okay, in under 10 minutes. Okay? And then a couple of years after that, and literally under a minute. All the PDFs on the web that you found in 2021 and 2032, you're going to be able to process in under 4 hours. Okay? And this is just the retail speed. If you had all these models running in parallel, you can go even faster. So imagine you had a system where every record you had passes through an LLM. Every log record comes through on ingest, passes through an LLM. Every query, when you query it, right, passes through an LLM. What can you possibly build? And so to conclude this OpenSearch, I had an opportunity to start with the keynote in 2023, announcing our new company, Aryn. To conclude this particular OpenSearch, I want to leave you with some parting thoughts. One, OpenSearch over the last 2-3 years has been a great foundation for us for building a startup. Both building a startup focused entirely on OpenSearch and then a startup focused around OpenSearch. Why? Because OpenSearch is a full-featured, tried and true, best-in-class search and analytics engine. But more than just the engine, it's the people here, right? The strong community of contributors, both individuals and enterprises, that make the ecosystem worth being part of. And the ecosystem in the past has been focused around log analytics and observability. And I argue in the future, in the next upcoming OpenSearch cons and beyond that, we should be trying to build the best open source search and analytics engine designed for agents, because that's where the world is moving to. And that's how we can differentiate from all the other open source projects out there. So with that, thank you, and I'm happy to take a few questions.
That number you posted earlier, that throughput number,
Which number? I've got a whole bunch of them here. 60,000 queries per second.
Where's that number come from?
Oh, I just made it up, right? Well, so look, a few hundred queries per second is something that you can probably do today, right? And I wanted something that was sort of a few orders of magnitude beyond that. Okay? I also wanted to make sure that we were kind of keeping in line with sort of the trends and inference that we were seeing on the model side. So not just the hardware inference, not just the sort of the improvements that we were having in the software around inference and the algorithms, but also based on the hardware. And so, we're really trying to push the envelope here. The question is, can we go 2 orders of magnitude and actually get it there? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen underneath the covers. Otherwise, what's going to happen is your LLMs above, which can probably issue a few tens or maybe hundreds of queries right now, in a few years, they're going to be, issuing tens of thousands of queries. And so you want to be able to keep up with them. But yeah, I had to kind of thumb in the air number. So I sounded good, right? So any other questions? Yeah, I mean, come on, I saw a bunch of other hands, so. Really? Everybody got really shy? Go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's asking the right question, but since the agents are processing so many queries, would it become a thought to like do a kind of cost control on the queries that agents must process in order to validate hypothesis?
Yeah. So the question is really about hey, wait a second, you're doing so many queries, you're going to blow out my cost budgets, right? I got a couple of sort of responses to that. Absolutely. Look, your best models continue to be pretty expensive. Every year, they get smarter, but they stay expensive. At the same time, any class of model that you're looking at, let's say a GPT-4 class model, their costs are going down by orders of magnitude, right? So, it's hard to tell, but my hope is that, I shouldn't even say hope, it's kind of like a vacuum, right? Like the work will fill will fill the space of a vacuum, right? So my hunch is that, for any particular class of model, if you can kind of keep up with that model, the budget will stay constant. And, that's my hope, right? Go ahead, John.
So I've heard that models will tend to diverge the more tokens you shove through them, right? So
Yeah.
if you dump the entire Wikipedia in one query, and if you could do it in 10 minutes, so isn't there a fundamental change or a fundamental technology improvement that has to happen on the model side that gets better at finding the needle in the big information?
Yeah. So the question is on the reliability of the models. The more you stuff into the model, the less reliable the model is. And so the short answer is absolutely. I do believe that the models are getting more and more reliable over time. Okay? They're getting certainly smarter and smarter over time. The thing the models are not doing in terms of scaling, even though the scaling numbers are 10x better per year in terms of performance or cost and so on, is that their context sizes are not actually improving 10x each time. And so if you actually spend some time looking at what's going on here, it's the context size and what you feed into that context that's going to keep sort of the accuracy of the model up. So our approach in Aryn, and this has been seen everywhere, is to try to kind of keep your data within the sweet spot of what's in the context there. And if you keep it within the sweet spot, you're really relying on all the inference speed, improvements that you're getting to be able to sweep through your model. And what you're going to end up doing is build algorithmic techniques on top of just asking a model a question and getting an answer, but picking out pieces and then combining them and so on to go get your answers. That's where a lot of the innovation is going to go. And so I suspect that that'll end up in places like OpenSearch or adjacent software from there. But I think we're to your point, I think we're going into a world where we're moving from just hoping that the models get better to doing a bunch of systems engineering beyond what the models can do to get the accuracy and scale that people want. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening and staying this late. Really appreciate it, and thank you for coming to OpenSearchCon.